Hi guys, my name is Alapini Precious Omokushe and I want to welcome you to another episode on economics class, courtesy O3 Schools JAMB application. So in this class, we'll be looking at what? Methods of economic analysis. The methods of economic analysis is a very simple yet a little bit broad topic. So it has been divided into three parts so that we can break it down easily for your understanding. The first aspect we'll be looking at is what the scientific economics. And then the second aspect, we'll look at what the basic tools of economic analysis. Then the last aspect, we'll look at the measures of central tendency. Slash the measures of dispersion. So we divided them into three aspects. We divided the topic into three aspects. That's the scientific economics, the basic tools of economic analysis, and the measures of what central tendency slash measures of the dispersion. So in this very first class, we'll be looking at what scientific economics. Don't forget that in our very first class, we gave several definitions of economics and then we finally settled for the most widely accepted definition, which defined economics as what? A science which studies human behavior in relation to what wants and what needs, and then scarcity and availability of resources. So now we're looking at what scientific economics. We cannot define or we cannot break down scientific economics without first looking at what theories. What is a theory? A theory is an abstract from reality, which is formed by isolating those factors which are important or that are important. Let's go. Those factors that are important in the determination of an economic event. As you can see on the board, a theory is an abstract from reality, which is formed by isolating those factors that are important in the determination of an economic event. We define theory because scientific economics is divided into two approaches. We have two approaches that we use in studying scientific economics. And the first one is what we call the inductive and deductive. We have the inductive and deductive method of economic theorizing. So we can see the first approach is the inductive and deductive method of economic theorizing. That's why I first of all define what a theory for you before we look at what the approaches. Although this is the first approach, we have the second approach. The second approach is what positive and normative economic analysis. So now, as you can see, there are two approaches we follow to what to explain or to study scientific economics. The first approach is what the inductive and deductive method of economic theorizing, and then the second approach is what the positive and normative economic analysis. And then we went on to what define a theory. A theory is an abstract from reality which is formed by isolating those factors that are important in the determination of an economic event. So now we're going to be looking at each of these approaches in detail. The first approach is what the inductive and deductive method of economic theorizing. Now let's start with the inductive method. Now let's look at what inductive and deductive method. Of economic theorizing. Economic scientists attempt to formulate theories that will help us explain human behavior in relationship to what to human wants, scarcity, and what availability of what of resources. So now let's look at the first method, the inductive method. Inductive method of what of economic theorizing. Now let's see, in this method of formulating theories in economics, we start from what we call the observation of facts. The inductive method starts with what? Observation of facts. That is facts gotten from what? From reality, real life situations. And then we go down towards to generalization, which then gives us what? Our theory. This is the inductive method explained in a very simple manner. The inductive method starts with what? The observation of facts. When we're talking about observation of facts, we're talking about observing real life situations, then we generalize them, and then we finally come up with our theory. Then the deductive method. The deductive method takes an opposite what? Form. In this case, the theory is formed first, before the generalization, and then before we what? We compare it to what? To real life situation, or before we what? Impose it on our day life. So the deductive method starts with what? The formulation of what? The theory. Formulation of theory before we what? We generalize. And then we what? Before we what? Finally observe it with our what? Our real life situations. Sorry about that. So now we can see the inductive method of economic theorizing starts with what? The observation of what? Of facts. And when we talk about observation of facts, we're talking about what? Observing real life situations before we generalize, and then we come up with what? A theory that suits the economy. But the deductive method starts with what? The formulation of theory. That means it takes a what? A very opposite form. If deductive is starting from the top, inductive is starting from the top, deductive is starting from the what? From the bottom. we're starting, deductive method starts with a formulation of theory before we generalize, and then we come up with, we now finally equate it to our real life situations. But the inductive method starts with the observation of facts, real life, before we generalize, and then we formulate our theory. So that is it for the inductive and deductive method of economic theorizing. It's very simple and self-explanatory. When you talk about inductive method, remember that it starts with the observation of facts, then we generalize, and then we come up with a theory at the end of the day. And then the deductive method starts with the formulation of theory before generalization, and then before we now apply to real life situations. Now the second aspect, which is the second approach, is more engaging than the first approach. So the second approach, which is the positive and the normative economic analysis. Positive and normative economic analysis. Now we'll start with what positive analysis. The first point when we talk about the positive analysis is the fact that it is concerned with what is obtained in an economy. Positive analysis is concerned with what is obtained in an economy. And then it is usually it is value free. The positive analysis is value free because it does not depend on the value judgment of individuals. Positive analysis is concerned with what is obtained in an economy, and it is value free because it is not concerned with it is not dependent, or it is not based on the value judgment of individuals. For example, when we talk about positive analysis, let's look at some examples. If you have something like a monetary or an expansionary, let's say an expansionary monetary policy will increase money supply in an economy. This is the first example that I would like to give. When it comes to positive analysis, we have number one, an expansionary monetary policy will increase monetary supply in an economy. Number two, when demand exceeds supply. There is a shortage. Second example said when demand exceeds supply, there is a shortage. And then we have when consumption. What happens? Sorry. What happens to consumption expenditure? When tax was increased. Now, we said positive analysis deals with what is obtained in an economy. The positive analysis is value free because it does not depend, or it is not based on the value judgment of individuals. And then we went on to look at some examples. Number one, we have an expansionary monetary policy will increase money supply in an economy. They say when demand exceeds supply, there is a what? There is a shortage. That's what happens in a market structure. When the demand for a certain product is more than the supply, or more than the the product that are available to satisfy that demand, there is a what? There is a shortage. And then what happens to consumption expenditure when tax is what? Increased. So this is what it is for what? For the positive analysis. Now we're looking at what? The normative analysis. It's not a typical opposite, but the normative analysis deals with what should be rather than what is obtained in an economy. The normative is talking about what should be obtained, no longer what should be. You will find that in the past question, although when we are done, we'll look at one or two questions from the past question before you go to the O3 Schools JAMB app by yourself and then take all the questions that are available on the positive and normative economic analysis and everything under scientific economics. So we have the word, the normative analysis. Normative analysis, like I said earlier, deals with what should be rather than what is, what should be obtained in an economy. What should be the outcome in an economy. And normative analysis is the opposite because it is what? It is not value free. Take note. Positive analysis is what? Is value free, while the normative analysis is what? Is not value free. It depends. It is based on the subjective value, subjective value judgment, actually, subjective value judgment of individuals. The positive analysis deals with what is, but the normative analysis deals with what should be obtained in an economy. And it is not value free. It is usually not value free because it is based on the subjective value judgment of individuals. Now, we'll also look at examples in this case. Examples. Number one, we have should a restrictive monetary policy or a restrictive fiscal policy be used in curbing inflation? The first example we're looking at is should a restrictive monetary policy or a restrictive fiscal policy should be used in curbing inflation? It is a question, actually. That is because it is based on the subjective value judgment of individuals. Another question we look at in normative analysis, we have should the market system, or let's say should resources be left to the market system, or should the government take charge in allocating scarce resources? Now, the first thing we look at here The first question we looked at was, should a restrictive monetary policy or a restrictive fiscal policy be used in curbing inflation? Another question we look at is, what should resources be left to the market system, or should the government take charge in allocating scarce resources? Another question we can also look at is, what should a regressive or progressive or tax system be used in an economy? These are all questions that fall under the word the normative analysis, because it is concerned with what should be in an economy, and it is usually not value free because it depends on the what on the value judgment, or it is based on the subjective value judgment of what of individuals. Individuals get to decide how it should be. Should it be a restrictive monetary policy, or should it be a restrictive or fiscal policy? Should that be used in curbing when we want to curb inflation? Or should resources be left to the market system, or should the government take charge in what allocating what scarce resources? The last question I gave just now was that should a regressive or progressive tax system be used in an economy? These are all questions that fall under the normative analysis. Okay, so that brings us to the end of scientific economics. Don't forget, from the very beginning, we looked at what the definition of what of a theory, where we said that what a theory is an abstract from reality, which is formed by what isolating those factors that are important in the determination of what of an economic event. Then we went down to look at the first approach in scientific economics, which we talked about the inductive and what the deductive method of what of economic theorizing, where the inductive method starts with what the observation of real life situation or observation of facts, before we went down to what generalization, and then we talked about the formulation of what of the theory. And the deductive method was a direct opposite, where we start from the formulation of theories before we now go to our generalization, and then we go to comparing it with what real life situation. I hope I'm not too fast. And then the last part we looked at was what the positive and normative economic analysis. The positive analysis deals with what is obtained in an economy, and it was what was value free because it wasn't based on what the value judgment of individuals. And then we looked at one or two questions where one or two examples where we talked about the fact that when demand exceeds supply, there was a shortage. And then we finally looked at what normative analysis, which is concerned with what should be obtained in an economy. It is not value free because it is based on the value judgment of what individuals. And we looked at three questions: should a progressive or regressive tax system be used? Should a restrictive monetary policy or restrictive fiscal policy be used when we want to curb inflation? Or another question we looked at is, well, should resources be left to the market system, or should the government take charge in allocating scarce resources? So if you go to the O3 Schools JAMB app and you search for what scientific economics, or you search for what method of what economic analysis, you can see all the questions that have come up from this particular aspect of the topic, and then you should be able to answer all of them. I will urge you to answer all the questions there for you to be sure that you have understood what we have learned today. But then let's look at one or two questions I have here before we finally end the class. There's a particular question that's actually very tricky. Now let's look at the question. The question said, normative economics deals with, we have the first option was what is and not what should be. The second option said facts and not figures. The third option said facts and figures. And then the last option said value judgment. Now let's look at this question. This question said normative economics deals with dash. And then we have what? The first option said what is and not what should be. That option is not correct because in our definition or in our explanation, we saw that what positive economics is what deals with what is, and then the normative economics deals with what should be. So the option A is obviously not the answer. And then say facts and not figures, obviously not the answer. Facts and figures, obviously not the answer. And then we have what? Value judgment. And of course, normative economics deals with what? With value judgment. Because don't forget, after we talked about the fact that it is concerned with what should be obtained in an economy, we went down to say that it is not value free because it is based on the value judgments of what? Of the individual. So the value judgment is the correct answer in this question. And then let's look at number 2 question. This is the last question we'll look at. It said a scientific approach in economic analysis entails dash. A, deductive method only. B, we have both inductive and normative methods. And then C, we have a normative method only, and we have what? D, both inductive and what? And deductive methods. So obviously the answer here is what? Option D. That is what? The both inductive and what? Deductive method. So if you go to the old three school JAMB app, you'll find similar questions like this, and I'm very sure that you'll be able to what? Answer each of those questions what? Correctly. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Alapini Precious. I'm Uncle and I'll see you in our next class. Thank you.